Now let's bring in Stacey Abrams, founder of Fair Fight and former Georgia Democratic candidate for governor. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I want to get your reaction to the state of play in Georgia after those primaries last night. As you watch these two Republicans in a runoff to face Senator Ossoff, what do you see as the deciding factors in that race?
I think it's a question of which person do you want as a champion for the people of Georgia, for the people of this country, a champion for democracy, or do you want two men who are fighting to prove their fealty to someone who is raising our prices, lowering our safety, and destroying our democracy? The two Republicans are in a pitched battle to prove that they are running to be supplicants to Trump, not to be defenders of democracy and champions for Georgia. And that's why Jon Ossoff is going to win.
And we're looking there at the governor's primary, as we just saw. Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, came in a distant third in that GOP primary for governor out of the runoff completely. As you know, he stood up for the integrity of the 2020 election. He rebuffed Trump's demand that he find 11,780 votes. So what does this result tell you about Georgia voters and President Trump's influence in your state more than 5 years later?
Well, while I appreciate the fact that Brad Raffensperger did not commit treason, let's be clear, he has been just as much a Trump acolyte on every other issue. And we have to remember that in the state of Georgia, we don't have access to health care through Medicaid expansion. We have some of the most expensive health care and the largest shortages in the country. We do not have access to affordable housing. We have voting rights challenges that are happening every single day. And Brad, much like his two opponents, Bert and Rick, were all part of the same coalition that supported Trump policies. Brad may not have wanted to see Trump steal an election, but he was perfectly happy watching him steal the futures of Georgians. And right now, what we're going to watch from Republicans are people who are committed to denying access to health care, denying affordability, while they enrich themselves. And they are very much in the Trump mold. And so in the next month, we are going to watch Rick Jackson and Burt Jones fight to see who can offend more people, who can hurt more Georgians, and who can do everything but serve the people of Georgia. And that's why I'm delighted that we have a candidate on our side up and down the ticket who will be fighting for Georgians every single day going forward.
MS now spoke with several Democrats in Georgia ahead of this election, and they expressed some real frustration with the Democratic Party. Here's just a sample.
I feel like they've let this run wild. I feel like nobody's being held accountable. I just feel like literally this administration can do anything and everything, and everybody's just letting it go.
I think more so the other side is messing up more. It's like a basketball game, not so much that the Democrats are scoring, but the other team just isn't right now.
Do you think the Democrats are improving in any sort of way?
No. I'll be 100% honest. No. I feel like sometimes when I'm looking at the news, I'm just kind of like banging my head against the wall.
Stacey, Georgia was the battleground of the 2020 cycle. Trump went 0-3 there with the pair of Senate losses, in addition to losing to Joe Biden in the presidency. But 4 years later, Trump won, and now a Senate seat is up for grabs again. How do you win over skeptical Democratic voters like we just heard from and convince them that 2020 in Georgia wasn't a fluke and that Democrats deserve their vote?
Well, Anna, that's the work that I'm doing with the 10 Steps campaign. We are fighting to show that Democrats and people who believe in democracy can fight back against an authoritarian regime that is doing everything in its power to create harm and chaos. I'm here right now because we believe that in Georgia and across the country, the false incarceration of families and children show that we have to stand up for and defend our people, that we can have safe borders without denying the humanity of the people that we serve. And so what Democrats have to do in Georgia and across the country is actually fight. We have to show that we will make certain that democracy delivers health care, delivers affordable groceries, delivers solutions to the problems they face. And so what we're going to do in Georgia and across this country, and what I'm committed to doing through the 10 Steps campaign, is making certain that we show Americans that we are in this to win not just an election, but to win the future for the people of this country.
Let's talk more about those economic matters. President Trump's approval numbers on the issue are tanking. A CBS poll shows he has just 27% approval on inflation, and even Republican support for him is sinking there. The thing is, Democrats aren't scoring much better. In that same survey, Only 35% say Democrats have a better approach on the economy, almost neck and neck with Republicans there at 31%. Why isn't the Democratic economic platform winning over more people right now?
I think what we have to look at is not what the macro says about the Democratic Party, but what we're seeing happen in election after election. Even in Georgia, we had some of the closest elections that we've seen in a while, and we are seeing more and more Democrats turn out. We are watching that happen across the country. Democrats may not have the strongest brand, but we have the strongest beliefs. And in this moment, our job is to show that Democrats and democracy can deliver. The 10 Steps campaign, the work that we're doing with the Read Them Home campaign, is about showing people the connective tissue between who we put in office and the outcomes that we deserve. And that means that we are making sure that families feel that Democrats are showing up, not just on election day, but every day in between elections. When we do that, the Democratic brand rises, but more importantly, our lives get better as Americans. Republicans have been in power now for the last few years. They have decimated our economy. They have decimated our trust, and they no longer deserve to be in power in Washington, D.C. or in the states.
I want to pivot to another issue that I know is near and dear to your heart right now and your work. The Brookings Institution just came out with a study on Trump immigration detentions, estimating that roughly 205,000 children, including 145,000 American kids, have experienced a parental detention in this Trump term. And today you are spearheading a national activation on the National Mall to demand an end to all family and child detentions. Of course, the White House is sure to just ignore those calls. But what are you hoping this will achieve?
We call this the Read Them Home campaign because we have to remind Americans we're talking about children. And so today on the Mall, we're going to have an activation where we're reading bedtime stories to children. We have been so delighted to have millions of Americans watch us do these readings online through social media and join. Miss Rachel has been a part of it. Michael Threets has been a part of it. The 10 Steps campaign, which I spearhead, has been joined by the National Domestic Workers Alliance and others. We are in it together because we have to remember that this is going to be a stain on the American conscience for a generation. We have children in prison. We have families in detention who've done nothing wrong. And we are not arresting criminals. We are arresting children and putting them in warehouses, putting them in horrific conditions. This is something that Democrats and Republicans can agree on. And we are here to remind every single elected member of Congress that this isn't about politics. This is about people. We need to hashtag Read Them Home. And so I encourage people to go to readthemhome.org and the 10stepscampaign.org to learn more about how you can help free these children, free their families, and remind Americans that we are human first, that we are people first, and no child should be incarcerated.
Stacey Abrams, thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate your time today.